From his humble beginnings training at Vern Gagne's camp in the Minnesota winter to going to Florida, Eddie Graham giving him the moniker of Ricky Steamboat in honor of Sammy Steamboat. And then he took that training and he went to the Mid-Atlantic area when Nature Boy, Ric Flair said, Jim Crockett, you're going to love this guy. Bring him in. We can absolutely do great business. And they did. They did great business in the 70s. And then they would meet up later in 1989, having three absolute classics that still hold up to this very day. But during that particular time period, he would team up with Jay Youngblood, a great tag team that burned out because Jay Youngblood burned out because of his lifestyle. We'll get to that. But then he said, you know what? I need to go to the World Wrestling Federation. I've been here too goddamn long, and also Dusty is bringing in his other crew, and I'll get to that too. But he was able to achieve the pinnacle of his success to that point in front of 93,173 people in Pontiac Silverdome, defeating Macho Man, Randy Savage, for the Intercontinental Championship. And then Ricky decided to choose family over his career, and Vince McMahon said, yoink, you're not going to have that. Steamboat said, fine, I'll stay away longer. And then he basically just never ended up forgetting that. And then Steamboat said, I'm going to retire. Oh, wait, I'll go and face Ric Flair in 3 classic matches and win the World Heavyweight Championship. And no! And then, even as he got older, in a tag team with Shane Douglas, feuding against Steve Austin for the United States Championship, ending his career because of a back injury, coming back in 2009 and looking just as great as ever. Maybe a slight step slower, but who else but Ricky Steamboat could still achieve that level of athleticism, the arm drags, the chops, the absolute pinnacle of agility, the best pure fucking babyface in the history of professional wrestling, at least as far as a national platform goes. Ricky Steamboat, truly one of the best to ever do it. I'm John Renton with my review, WWE on A&E Biography, WWE Legends on Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Yeah, a bit of a long intro there, and really I was looking forward to this one, and it didn't really tell a ton that most didn't already know. This was more of a fleshed out edition of the hour-long biography they did of him when they did a 3-disc set back in 2010 or so. But he was the best pure fucking babyface. I mean, even though his name was Richard Blood, which is a great goddamn name, but since he was a babyface, he had to have that change. The wraparound thing was how he was always into Cars. Not the band The Cars, even though they were nice, because, it's magic when I'm with you. Maybe that's his third wife. It's magic. So, yeah, he talks about getting a thrill racing. The Talking Heads, not the same as it ever was. Some are once in a lifetime. Nikita Koloff, I would like to have heard from him more, even though I don't know if him and Ricky necessarily interacted that much. Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Rey Mysterio. More on Hogan here in a bit. Brothers Arthur and Victor. That was nice to hear from them. Tony Atlas, keep these two away from each other. Keith Elliott Greenberg, by the way, a tremendous wrestling historian. He's great in these. I wish that they would have focused on him a little bit more besides just Ricky, because I thought he was phenomenal. And I still do. Greenberg's a great wrestling historian. Great follow on Twitter as well. So, yeah, Richard Blood. God, what a name. So his dad was in the Army for 22 years. He met his wife, who was Japanese, and white, Japanese, out of World War II. Dad's parents, aka Ricky's grandparents, wouldn't even let her in the house because she was Japanese, because, racism, and racism was a heavy thing that was told through the first bit of this whole thing. It's not okay, don't judge people based on their race, judge them based on how they are, and maybe who they vote for. But nevertheless, let's just get away from that. The whole point is that Ricky dealt with a lot of stuff, but he learned to be a little bit hardened and fight back and this kind of stuff. And I did like the old pics and family film. So he left basketball, walked right into the wrestling team. Obviously, he was a natural at it. He would also do gas station work, which, especially for self-serve or for full service ones, can be rather tough. He discovered his love of cars there, seeing all that stuff. Donna Gagne, Vern Gagne's daughter, saw Ricky, recommended him, Keith Elliott Greenberg chimed in about the Gagne training camp. Burns' training school was certainly unique. It was a barn that was about 20,000 stories tall. Actually, I think it was like, just a regular barn. It was nice that the Iron Sheik, they had more interview pieces from him literally just before his death. But that was great. It's great to hear from Sheik. He talked about how tough Steamboat was. This brief stint in the AWA, he was only there for the first few months of his career. And Gagne sent him out to Florida. I did like how they had some Eddie Graham interview footage just from the Florida TV. That was really nice because it's just so good how they find this shit. And Eddie naturally would see a lot how could you not see a lot in Steamboat? Even as somebody that did see the WrestleMania 3 match and everything, a lot of his career was before my time. So getting a chance to go back and look at some of that stuff and getting a chance to look at the Mid-Atlantic stuff and even a little bit of the Florida stuff was really, really nice. The Steamboat name for Sammy Steamboat, the nephew of Sammy Steamboat, who is a name that meant a lot in the Florida area. And there was a match that Steamboat had with Ernie Ladd, and he had kind of smartened his parents up saying, not totally, but smartened them up enough. It looks like I'm going to be really hurt. Don't worry. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. It's, it's enough of a work or whatever. Without fully telling him that, just, don't worry, I'll be okay. I'm tough. But then Ernie Ladd was beating him up and everything. Dad gets on the apron with a chair. Don't worry, son, I'm coming for you. And then, he's saying, Dad, I told you that. Don't blame me, blame your mother. It's like, oh, he a cheater. If you get, the broken English, that guys, it was just funny to hear Steamboat mention what his mom said. I did love the old Mid-Atlantic footage. That was really, really nice. How they did the angle where Steamboat got, hard weighed, his face rubbed on the concrete. I did not know that Harley Race used sandpaper to make the wounds worse. Ouch! The lengths that people would go to for that. And then sometime later when he was healing, Steamboat attacked Flair, ripped his suit off, which was a great angle. Just in front of what the fuck, they hold there 100 people? And in front of a nationwide audience, because, it was going all over the goddamn country, at least those that had cable. This is a big fucking deal. And that was a cool angle. And they feuded, I believe, over the U.S. title, if I remember right. I want to say they feuded over the TV title also, but I might be misremembering those. But they feuded over championships, and they just had, great stuff. And Mid-Atlantic at that point was just rising up like crazy. He teamed with Jay Youngblood. They kind of skipped over quite a bit of that. They didn't talk about Starrcade 83. They didn't talk about the different lifestyles. Jay Youngblood, unfortunately, did flame out and died very, very young. I think he died in 84, 85. They were close, but Steamboat realized that kind of can't hang out with this guy. Kind of really can't do that. So he talks about his time in Japan, working for Baba, and said to Giant Baba, you have connections, sir. Could you maybe find my mom's family? And Baba had, great influence, also had a lot of good people working for him. And they found his mother's older brother. So he got emotional about that, which was, because it meant a lot to his mother. And they flew over to Japan, the mother did, connected with the brother. And it was like a 2-week, ticket or whatever, 2-week stay. Because Baba was generous with his money, especially for those talents that were loyal to him. And he was very gracious with how he paid people. And he saw it was a big deal. Ricky drew him some money. Ricky was a great worker. Just incredible. And you could obviously see why Ricky would be over in Japan. Taking a look at the guy, especially then. It wasn't going to work because she was having an argument with her older sister. I want to go home. But it worked out in the end. Everybody was together. It meant a lot. Because, you can be stubborn and everything. It worked out. That meant a lot to Ricky. They had mentioned how Dusty was taking over the book, bringing in a crew. And I don't know if he necessarily... I don't know if Ricky was just burned out being in the Mid-Atlantic area or maybe saw that he wasn't going to be used that well by Dusty. That's what I've heard, and you kind of can see based on the TV, based on how things are going, that he probably was better off going to the WWF. And he went there in 85. The Bruce Lee gimmick, which, I mean, yeah, it was cool at the time, but looking at it, I go, I don't know how that worked. I mean, it made Ricky cool. It made him stand out, because now he's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Greenberg was great in this, as I've noted. Vince was making wrestling more cartoonish, but to be fair, it was working. People were really gravitating towards it. Yes, the retired tours like Crockett still had a lot of fans. The Von Erichs in 85 were still doing all right, and until, Mike couldn't shoulder the responsibility. And a year later, Kerry lost his foot because of his bike. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But, the AWA was faltering because Vince took a lot of their talent because Vern wasn't being smart with how he was going to pay people and also take care of people. So Shane Douglas chimes in, RVD as well. The arm drags were just a staple of his offense, just absolutely great. And they skipped over the Jake feud where Jake DDT'd him on the floor, and he said it sounded like a watermelon smashing. The Komodo, or the dragon, the scaly. It wasn't an actual Komodo dragon. That would have been a mistake. It would have been a big mistake for a goddamn Komodo dragon to be there. But it was that versus, I think it was a snake pit match or something like that. It was him and Jake with their scaly creatures fighting each other. Gross. But the feud was savage. Hit, the throat on the guardrail. Throat, getting hit with the bell, learning how to speak, hey, doing all this, like trying to, force it, that kind of stuff. Not force it like, David Carradine in Bangkok, but the Mania 3 build, the long trips, the tough family life. I would feel bad for Bonnie, but Bonnie was a complete twat, who I have nothing good to say about, and thought of herself as a star, was wearing ball gowns and WCW that cost quite a bit, and nobody could relate to her, and nobody bought into her, and nobody liked her. Why would you like her? I mean, you take a look at her, and you just wish that one of the women in the company had slapped her around. One of the women, because I don't condone male on woman violence. But he asked for time off in December of 86, because Ricky was going to be born, or Richie, little Ricky. He's going to be born in, late June, early July of 87. He just wanted 2 weeks off. And Vince granted it. That was back in December of 86. Yeah, sure, no problem. So, the Silverdome, 93,173. I still say about 80, but whatever. That's semantics at that point. One of the best matches ever against Randy. I'm not going to go into great detail. I've talked about that match at length on various videos. But it was great stuff. They paced it so well, stole the show. I imagine Hogan probably wasn't happy being upstage. Andre probably didn't care because Andre was too drunk. And Andre was a made man by that point. It's not that Hogan wasn't. But Hogan just couldn't stand that other people could out-wrestle him, i.e. most people on that card. And in wrestling at that point. But Hogan could talk and draw people into the building. So they switched the title. The title can't be dormant for 2 weeks. Bear in mind that there were times where Hogan wouldn't defend the title on TV at all. And you're telling me that they couldn't have just said, hey, Ricky, take those 2 weeks off, it'll be fine. No, Vince was upset because he gave him this opportunity, like dangling his carrot, like, who cares if your kid was born, pal? But Vince was spiteful. This led to the worst IC title reign ever that I still say, because, I'm sorry, Honky Tonk Man was a gimmick that worked for a bit, but never deserved to be the champion for 454 days, something like that. I know Gunther broke it, and he deserved to break it, because I didn't like Honky at all, but I digress. Ricky basically was pissed off, and it's like, 2 weeks? Well, how about I take 6 months off? Because it was June? See, he actually didn't take 6 months off, because I believe he was part of the Survivor Series 87 team, where he was teaming with Savage, because Vince just didn't give a shit at that point. It was what it was. I mean, I don't blame Ricky for taking time off, and nor should he blame himself. He took time off to see his son be born, and spend some time with him. Also, he'd been wrestling since what, 73? 73, 74? He'd been wrestling for quite a bit. It was somewhere around that. I'm trying to remember, because I know he went to Mid-Atlantic very early in his career, but he trained hard and, look, it beat up his body, and even though he was still in great shape, wanted to spend time with his family, can't fault that. Bonnie should have not acted like she contributed anything besides sharding out Richie. I'm not saying that childbirth isn't painful, but not nearly as painful as dealing with Bonnie. You never deserved to be named Steamboat at all, you twat. Can't say my favorite swear. It sounds like the British people saying the word can't. That's what I'll say. So, he was at Mania 4. They did skip over him versus Rick Rude at Royal Rumble 88, which was a choice. It was a good match, but it was a choice. He should have beaten Greg Valentine and faced off against Randy Savage at Mania 4. Now, I believe Vince was being spiteful, and Hogan probably got in his ear like, brother, you can't let him, get over me again, brother. My Hogan impression sounds a lot like Randy. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But he then left, I believe, after SummerSlam 88. I believe he was part of that, if I remember right. Then after that, he was done. Semi-retired. I think he opened a gym, if I remember right. But then he had the NWA stint. He came back in late 88, early 89. It was around that. That's when WCW was starting to spiral out of control. But they loved Ricky. And how could you not love Ricky? And the feud that he had with Rick, beating him on the TV taping. And then building the Chi-Town Rumble 89 when he beat, and I retro-viewed that. I retro-viewed the Clash of Champions and the Superdome that George Scott didn't promote, and they had only like 5,300 to 6,000 people in a massive, massive arena, stadium, cavernous. 6,000 people wouldn't even fill up a 10,000 seat arena in my particular state. It would barely fill out a couple mid-size arenas in my state. Nevertheless, he then lost it at Wrestle War 89. That was May 7th. He's like, oh, I held the title for like a month. You actually held it for like about 2.5 months, Ricky, but math. And he's had brain issues. He wanted to, I did love how like the Chi-Town Rumble just featured one of the Chicago Bears, just all like shocked once Rick won. It's like, what? Or once Rick lost, and Ricky beat Rick. They didn't continue the feud. They went right into an angle with him and Funk. I believe he faced off against, if I remember right, he faced off against Luger at either a Clash or it was the Great American Bash 89. One of the two. I am trying to remember. And I want to say he even faced off against him at Halloween Havoc 89. No, it was Luger. Luger against Pillman in 89? Whole point is Ricky felt like he was not being utilized all that well. So, yeah, he bounced around a little bit, spent some more time at home. Jim Herd wanted to cut his pay in half. Jim Herd's a fucking idiot. I wish that motherfucker, has the worst goddamn time, in his life because he doesn't deserve to live this long for what he did to wrestling. But he went back to WWF in 1991, and they spent a lot of time on the fire-breathing stuff because Bruce Pritchard was over the moon and being the avatar for Vince. Because why would you show Vince on this goddamn thing? Vince was mentioned quite a bit. Yeah, stupid Bruce Pritchard trying to justify all this. Oh, it looks cool. Yeah. And what'd you guys do with it? You guys didn't do much with it. He came back. He wasn't part of Mania 7. He was part of a 6-man, I want to say, at SummerSlam 91, because they only did a few pay-per-views a year. Then they did Tuesday in Texas, but I think he was gone by that point because he showed back up in WCW like before, I want to say, Survivor Series 1991. But yeah, just spend so much time on the fire-breathing stuff, and he saw the guy blow, they blew back in his face, the fire-breathing stuff in his face caught on fire. No, it's fine. And yeah, it looked cool as a kid, it looked cool, but God, it led to nothing. He was called the Dragon, he wasn't even called Ricky Steamboat. He hadn't been gone from the company for like 8 centuries. But then he was a mystery partner for Dustin Rhodes. And then we went to Starrcade 91. I believe he's part of Battle Bowl. Teaming with Shane Douglas. Look, him and Shane Douglas were a good team. And there's no doubt that Shane Douglas learned something from Ricky. He didn't learn how to draw money like Ricky, but I digress. Yes, okay, Shane did well in ECW. The problem is Heyman liked to waste money in ECW. One of my favorite matches from 92, actually, they skipped over the stuff with Rick Rude, which I understand. I really enjoyed those matches. They had a 30-man Iron Man match at Beach Blast 92, I believe. They skipped over the match with Pillman at Halloween Havoc 92. Yeah, you can only show so much, but Starrcade 92 was him and Douglas against Pillman and Wyndham, I believe. Barry Windham. I don't know why I need to say that, because Barry was only the only good Wyndham brother. It certainly wasn't Kendall. I'm sorry. I've watched enough of Kendall, even in late era WCW, to know he was fucking rotten. But yeah, that's one of my favorite tag matches ever. That's one of my favorite tag matches of the 90s. I could watch that match a couple times a year, not get bored. His marriage started to fall apart. Bonnie wanted a divorce shortly after he retired. Again, one of the women in wrestling should have just tried to, I don't know, teach her that she doesn't belong. She didn't. And I'm not saying Ricky was a fucking saint. I'm not saying Ricky didn't have his issues. But god damn it, Bonnie was a gold-digging twat. So, the feud with Steve Austin is something I really like them, featuring a little bit. Suffered the back injury, herniated disc, and a fracture. Accumulation of injuries ended his career, basically. He probably could have rehabbed it and come back, but he's like, I'm 40, 42 at this point. I really want to be done. I think he was 40, actually. I think he was born in 54. But Bonnie divorced him soon after he retired. Wanted a divorce while he was reading the morning paper. Yeah, try to have Bonnie read that morning paper. I guarantee you she couldn't. She could read if there was money involved, because you pay the gold-digging twat enough. But let's move on. He got into car work and go-karts and racing a little bit. He grew close to his son during his time as they worked on cars. He became a producer for WWE now. Vince was on board. Well, he was probably on another paralegal. Let's move on. The talents were able to pick his brain. He was grateful to Hall of Fame. Competed at Mania 25 against, a guy whose wife was at the January 6, 2021 insurrection attempt, Chris Jericho, which he will never address. And he had the match at Backlash 2009. He could move just as well. Sure, okay, he was a step slower. That man is 56 and had been out of the ring for a number of years, and also obviously had an accumulation of injuries. You can only do so much. He still did great. And the new episode is going to be on June 16th. I guess for some reason they're not having any for a couple weeks. I don't know why. I will do my best to review these in due time. Hopefully I can. I got some different shifts coming up. But he kept training basically to stay limber. And then the Nexus attacked him as he was plugging his DVD. He's going to be part of the SummerSlam 2010 tag. That's why Bret Hart got included, because he suffered some kind of brain hemorrhage, brain issue. He had rage issues. He had to divorce him from his other wife, which he even admits he was going through a lot, and she didn't deserve that. And then he met Sandy, his third wife, or his current wife. He could have been married after Bonnie, before the other one. I don't know, and I don't care. But he's doing well. His legacy is intact. He means a whole lot to a lot of people. Truly one of the all-time great baby faces. I wish they could have included a bit more of his, a bit more match footage. Just say this. And Steamboat could have maybe done a bit more like, I loved wrestling this guy and this guy and this guy. That being said, overall, pretty good documentary. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.